Welcome to Riker Writes. I'm J. Allen Riker, and we are continuing on our journey of self-publishing discovery from first step to last. If you watched the previous video in this series in the playlist, it will show you how to make an ebook with Scrivener. However, I actually recorded the video following this introduction first. After I edited it down to a tight hour and 20 minutes, I realized that it was going to scare a lot of people. I went back and I looked at Scrivener again. I looked at it before shooting the video that you're about to watch at the EPUB that it produces, and I decided that it had too much styling. Well, after shooting this video, I decided to take another look, and I realized that the majority of the styling in its CSS file is for things like captions, things like footnotes. It puts all of that styling in there and then does not use it. It does not have it never calls on that styling class. So when I looked at the paragraph styling, I found it to be extremely minimal, especially compared to doing what this video shows you, which is to create a Mobi file, which turns out simple and perfect, but because Amazon no longer accepts Mobi files, you have to convert it with Calibre or something else, and every conversion process I found introduced more styling than just making the ebook from the start in Scrivener. I've heard also in the comments, I heard that Pages makes a good ebook for people who have Apple products. I have never looked into one of those EPUBs. You can turn an EPUB into a zip and then look at it, so I can't tell you that the styling is really simple, but that's what I've heard. If Kindle still took Mobi files, I would consider the method described in this video to be the best because you have so much control over the outcome. Now, is it essential to have that level of control? It used to be. I don't think it is necessarily anymore. I am an old dog learning new tricks. But especially since you don't have control over the conversion process to EPUB, I don't think that the method in this video is necessarily the right one. It is the one that I'm going to continue doing probably as I publish my old books, but after that, I'm going to have to reassess my process. But one thing that this video will do is it will show you how an ebook works on the inside. And it will show you how to make changes that you want to make if you encounter issues through your chosen process. It's also very useful for seeing how consistent of a product your ebook processing software or service, if you hire someone, actually does. Just because an ebook looks good on your e-reader doesn't mean that it won't look a mess on the next. An e-reader that you maybe don't have access to. There's honestly no amount of testing that is a substitute for opening up that EPUB file and looking at what's there under the hood. To anyone who says to me, yeah, but you're a computer programmer, I started doing this process almost a decade before I decided to become a computer programmer. I did one workbook on HTML5, which I would advise anybody to learn about. The workbook I did was Headfirst HTML. Yeah, it was quite a while ago, but I think it probably is still mostly all you would need. And after that, I just went through the process, learning day by day. So with this step-by-step guide, I know that you absolutely can do it. Is it still worth making an ebook this way? Probably not, if you don't already know how. Is it worth knowing? Yes. So with that enormous preamble out of the way, let's get to the video. Welcome to Riker Writes. I'm J. Allen Riker. Today we are going to discuss how to format your ebook so that you can do it yourself and so that you can know that it's done right. I know that it has seemed to a lot of people that you either need a lot of technical expertise or you need to pay a lot of money to someone who has that, or you need to risk putting out a bad product that's just been exported as an ebook from software. But I'm here to show you step by step how to go through and do the entire process by hand. I'm going to do my novel, The Horde, which I showed as an example in the last video about how to make a cover. And although I'm a little bit rusty and I'm probably going to have to look up some stuff or poke around a little bit at least, probably not look anything up, but poke around and try things out. Normally, this would not take me longer than an hour, this process, like for real, for an entire novel. And this is for something that's going to live out there for a decade or longer. So I think it's well worth the effort to create a really nice product. Now, what do I mean when I say that it produces a nice product? There is a lot of stuff that goes on in the background in word processors where it's doing a lot of formatting. And when you ask it to put out an EPUB file, it is going to guess at what you want to be explicit and controlled and what you want to leave up to the e-reader. We want to leave as much up to the e-reader as possible. If you look here, there's something called headers. If you're not familiar with HTML, may look confusing, but there are headers and then there's regular text. So headers would be the big text that marks the beginning of different sections. This tells it to be centered, but it does not give it a size. That's because the e-reader will have a default size for each one of these things. What you don't want to do is over format and try to force the e-reader to do something that the user doesn't want it to do. Your opinion of how it should look is not as important as what the reader has chosen for their defaults. You shouldn't try to impose your design view, your layout view on them in an ebook. An ebook is just a very simple HTML document, basically a website. It has a lot of the things you'll find in a website, except it doesn't have JavaScript, but it has style sheets, it has styles, CSS styling, and it has HTML. And so the fact that you want it to be simple means that you can make a better product than somebody who is doing it more complicated or who is explicitly saying a lot of styles or who is exporting something that retains a lot of styles. That's the thing that you, at this point, that you don't know. If you pay someone to format your ebook, you don't know how they made it. And so you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I can show you I'm going to show you how to check that. Now, the technology has changed a bit, and there is something that I am not sure of the best thing to do. It used to be that Amazon took Mobi files instead of EPUB files. I still use the Mobi creation pattern, but then I convert it to an EPUB. The EPUB conversion process puts in more explicit styling than I would prefer, and it depends on what you use. Calibre is kind of the program that's the go-to for this, and I will be showing you that. All of this I'll be giving links to, and I'm going to find some way to host a zip file that's going to contain all the files you need, all these template versions of these files that you need, and the Kindle generation, the Kindle book generation executable. If you know, I've tested a couple of different conversion processes, but they've been online. I don't necessarily trust them, and I don't want to tell you to use them. If you know of a good one or a good piece of software like that you run locally, would be even better. Let us know in the comments. But this is a good process. So far I have not, even despite the fact that now the Mobi is kind of a deprecated format, creating that very explicitly and then converting it to an EPUB, I have not yet seen an issue. This will work. There is just a bit that could be improved on. All right, so that's probably enough preamble. I want to show you kind of what I'm going to be using as a guide, but modified. I mixed from a few different sources, but this source is still available, so I want to draw your attention to it, and I will link to it. Guido Henkel's Take Pride in Your Ebook Formatting. This will tell you how to format a basically perfect for a novel HTML file. Now we are going to go further than that because we're going to create the metadata file and the table of contents file by hand. But this will do a lot of the work. So although you won't see me referring to this, you can read it if you want to know exactly what I am doing. I don't need to refer to it anymore. The first step is to take your manuscript from in your word processing program and do a couple of things to it there. The thing that we're going to do with the text is we are going to turn it into HTML. That means that we need to capture all of the formatting before we convert it to HTML, because the formatting is done in markup. That's what the ML in HTML stands for, markup language. So it doesn't retain any formatting. It's plain text, but we can mark the formatting as we go, and we will be doing that. So what we need to do here, though, is there are a couple of things that you cannot do in Notepad. That's what we were looking at before. Notepad is what we will use to do most of the technical work, but there are a couple things that you need to do within your word processing program. I'm going to show you Word because that is the word processor that I use. You can get it 2021 Professional off of eBay still, like as a actual program, so you don't have to pay a subscription, and it should cost you under $100. Okay, so one thing that you'll see here is depending on how you type it, you may notice, and you may not have noticed, but I'm going to draw your attention to the fact that these quotation marks are straight. We don't want that. We want smart quotes. That means that they curl in towards the text that they are surrounding. That also includes single quotation marks, apostrophes. This is very easy to do. It's kind of silly. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to, we're in find, and so we'll need to do a replace. So what you do is you type in a quotation mark and you replace it with quotation marks, and then you hit replace all. And if you look, now they lean. That means that these are ones that we can replace with left double quotation and right double quotation. You need to do the same thing with your single quotation marks, and then you're good to go. Now, if your word processor is already set up to have these as in the right direction, then this is a step that you don't have to take. There's one other step that you need to take, though, in your word processing program, and that is to deal with your italics. I don't use a lot of italics. I was taught that it's a little bit hackish, that you should be able to tell the emphasis from the words and the dialogue itself, and you should not need to use a lot of italics in dialogue. Some people use italics in things that are not dialogue, and so that's going to come up. But I find that sometimes I do like to put emphasis on a word regardless. I think it's fine most of the time. But what you have to do in order to actually get these to show up as italics in an ebook will probably make you use italics less. It's one step that is very manual and is kind of annoying. So we are going to put, this is the HTML that marks something as being italics. So I'm going to be copying and pasting that in around every instance of italics in this. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an advanced find. And with advanced find, that is going to, so I don't know if you saw what I did, but here in navigation, I clicked this little arrow and I get advanced find. So in advanced find, we can look at let me move this. We can look at format, and we'll want to look at font format. And then we're going to want to search for italics. Okay. And we don't want anything in the actual find. What we are only in the find what, because we want to find anything that's italics. So we leave that blank. We search for italics. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to want to do before you start messing with your manuscript here and finding and replacing things, let's not mess up your manuscript. So I make within my book folder, I created a Mobi folder to create the Mobi file from, and I'm going to put in a copy of the manuscript that is just for modifying for the HTML. So you'll notice this, one thing that you may notice is that this file name is different than all the others because it has spaces. That's because I'm not going to be using this at any point. I'm going to be copying and pasting out of it. Any files that you are creating to use to create your ebook, because they refer to each other throughout, you want to make sure that you don't have any empty spaces. You can use underscores, or you can use what's called camel casing, which is to just capitalize the first letter of every word. By the way, this is going to be a long and painful video. It's probably not going to be fun to watch. If you want to, put it on and watch it so that you can have an understanding of what's going on. And honestly, it would probably save you some heartache on things like including massive amounts of italics, or there are other little things that it might influence you on. But this is not going to be a fun watch. So you've been warned. So again, we are going to use advanced find. We were finding italic. It still has it from last time. So we find that one. And what we will do is paste in, oh no, not paste in that. We will paste in, what we will do is we will paste in the HTML that indicates italics. Now the closing one has a slash. I only copy the opening one and then I add the closing one as I go. Super fun, right? Okay, and that means we're done. So that was all the work that needs to be done within the text in your manuscript. You can go ahead and just save that, and then we're going to select all and copy it, and we're going to do the rest of the work in Notepad++. Notepad++ is a text editor. It's used a lot by programmers. There are other ones, like if you're a programmer and you have ones that you like better, by all means. But this is the one that I know and I like, so it is the one I'm going to use. So I just pasted the entire novel in here. One thing you'll see is that I had tabs in this. Oh boy. So I'll show you how to get rid of those. Don't use those. You know, set up the tabs. Don't use tabs that you actually type in. Set up your tabs within the bar. So right here, set up your tabs. So you see we have white space that we can get rid of. HTML does not respect white space. Before we deal with all the white space though, I'm going to get rid of that tab. And that means that I have to make sure that this view is in no wrapping. I'm going to save this now as an HTML file. So I have to make now that what I have to make sure is that there's nothing that I'm going to chop out by getting rid of all of those tabs. Because you can see here that switches over. So I'm going to work from there up. We're going to get rid of all of these tabs by holding Alt and selecting. You hold Alt and select down instead of, now if you don't hold Alt, then it grabs everything, which is the normal behavior. If you hold Alt, you see I'm catching a stray letter. So if you hold Alt, then it will grab the same part of all the lines. Okay, so then we're going to go from here. I'm going to click right there. We're going to hold Alt. Let's take a look, one last look to make sure that I'm not chopping the first couple words off of anything. Okay, it looks good. So we hit delete. There we go. You can see the italic marker carried through, which is good because as you can see, the italic formatting did not. That's why that's the steps that you have to do in your word processor, because you'll lose the italics as you copy that over. All right, so now we're going to do a bunch of searching and replacing. So strap in for the excitement. The first one that we do is a regular expression. So we're going to look for this. If you are on a Mac, I think is the distinction. There is another version of this. Check Guido Henkel's guide. I'll show you in a minute, but you can copy and paste it directly from his guide. And what we're going to be replacing it with, actually, this one is the same. This one is slightly different if you are on, I believe, if you are on a Windows machine or an Apple machine. So let's do replace all. And look at that. In one easy step, this has been converted into a very boring HTML file, but it will display not exactly correctly because it's not going to give you, like, this is not going to be big. The chapter is not going to be big, but it will basically, with that one step, this is ready to become an ebook. Let's make it nicer. What do you say? So I'm going to save it as I go because I like to do that. We're going to go back to normal mode and we're going to do search and replace on a bunch of different things. So this is what I use when I am typing to indicate a new section. We'll see if I did that back then. What we want though is we want that to be centered. So let's see if this works. Everything is wrapped in paragraphs, remember, at this point. So that's what the P stands for. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to remember a lot of things that I need to explain. This tag means that it's a paragraph. HTML does not respect white space outside of tags. So this tag P and end P means that it's the start of a paragraph and the end of a paragraph. This will add the class center to it, which we actually don't have on here yet, but we will have in the thing that we will be pasting this HTML into. So there were 33 occurrences of this within my document. This is how I show a scene break. You need to have a consistent way that you show a scene break. It could be 3 stars with one space in between, like I do. It could be 3 stars with no spaces in between. It could be tildes, whatever, as long as you're consistent so that you can make sure that you center it. That's one little bit of formatting that we want to provide. So just so that you know, what this is that puts a marker on what type of paragraph this is. And we designate that. we describe, we add that this is artificial. Center does not actually mean anything here, except it means that it is part of a class. And that class is described here, text-align center. These are your styles. It's not broken out in a separate style sheet. There's so little that there's no real point in that. And so we are applying the style center, and so this will be text-aligned centered. Okay, so let's look for everything else. So I'm going to provide a sheet for you with all of these things that I look for every time. So these each need to be replaced with their HTML counterpart. I use ellipses. Now, you got to make sure that you, first of all, create ellipses instead of 3 periods. Instead of double hyphens, you'll use an M dash. TK is a good mark if you want to note that you come back to something. So because it so rarely occurs, the only place that I found it is pocket knife when it's typed without a space. It has a TK. That's the only one that I ever catch. So if you want to mark up your document with something to be able to look back at it later, TK is a good one. Nowadays we have comments, so you don't necessarily need TK. Accent aigu is one that you still see in some words like that we use in English, so I do keep that there. And then these are things that I use in my editing process. These are not things that I replace at this time. These are words that you should always try to replace, though, when you're revising. Okay, so I will be putting this in the zip file so that you have a full list of the things of the different formatting things that you're going to need to be looking for. So we're going to look for a right single quote, and we're going to replace it with this. And you can see that you can kind of read it. It's a little bit human language readable. It's right single quote. We're going to replace all, almost 1,600 occurrences. Now we'll do a left single quote. I've got these in here because I do this, and so it's remembering. Only one. The right single quote is used in between conjunctions, so you can see it here. Rats is R-A-T, right single quote, S. But the left single quote isn't used nearly as much. Okay, we're going to use right double quote, so you can probably guess what that's going to be. Our D quote. So this will be comparable right here. We need to replace the left one with LD quo. Now I think I'm going to have to go through and search for these before I can really... Okay, so it did have 37 instances of ellipses. We're going to do, and it's 63 occurrences of that type of M dash and 0 of the short kind. There are 2 types of M dashes, by the way. I don't know. And you can see that that's an M dash because that's a hyphen right there. I'm going to do a search, though, for 3 periods. And yeah, there are some that I didn't catch. So 3 periods we are replacing with ellipsis. You see it's H and then ellipsis. I guess HTML ellipsis, I don't know. There were 3 occurrences of that. And now we're going to be replacing double hyphen because that's how it's typed. M dash is typed. And we're going to replace that, and there were two of those. So there we have basically that is the majority of getting the formatting right. There's one more. Now we need to delineate the white space, and this is what delineates white space. It's a paragraph, and with this HTML, I can't remember what they're called. So we're going through, and any place where we see this, although we're not going to keep this right here, I'm not going to keep this. Well, yeah, we're going to be copying and pasting a lot of this. Is kind of what I'm saying, but so I'm not going to go and do these, but what I do want to catch are all of the ones around these section breaks, because those I will be copying and pasting directly. What I'm trying to say is that as far as the chapter breaks, I'm going to be copying and pasting it chapter by chapter so that I can set up the chapter so that it will link correctly to the table of contents, and it's much easier. You're going to have to decide. I find it easier to paste into a document that's been formatted for the table of contents rather than typing the table of contents link formatting into the actual full manuscript. So it's kind of a long process. I'm sure I'm going to just speed it up as I show you. Probably should be doing that now. If you ever want to select a line, you can click on the number of the line, and it does a much better job than trying to manually select it. If you were to have planned for this, then you could make sure that you leave white space, like one line of white space around each of your separators, and then run that search and replace, and it would have created this. And then you could search and replace this with this. I did not do that, so now I'm having to do it manually. I don't know why, but things like this don't really bother me until I'm taping something and aware of other people being bored. Okay, so we have the white space taken care of. So now what we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this into the template. I'm going to take a look at how many chapters I have. I've got chapters 1 through 23, and then I've got an epilogue. So I'm going to send this over to the other view. You're not going to be able to fully see it, but you'll see me working with it over on the left. I can't show it all at once. So because everyone's book is going to be a different length, and every one of your books is going to be a different length, I only put 4 chapters and then one, and then an about the author chapter here. So I will need to be doing I will need to do a lot of copy pasting here to make the space to fit all 24 of my chapters. I'll do that 6 times. Okay. This is going to be annoying. So now I have to go through and change three things. The ID, this is very important. This is how your table of contents, this is how your table of content file will know where to send somebody when they switch chapters within the e-reader. This stuff, okay, so I actually don't need to change this because this is just a placeholder for content. Let me show you, okay, so let me do a quick overview first of what I did to create these templates for you guys. So normally I don't do this. I just take it from my last book because then it has all this stuff filled in for me. But I wanted to make something that was generic for you. If you search for AAAA, so 4 A's, I've tried to mark every place where you have to put something of your own into it with that, which we will be doing after we paste the book contents in. So title in all caps, book title, your name. This is the front matter. So this is the like the page before the title page, and then the copyright stuff, and then you'll have your table of contents here if you want to explicitly lay it out. I don't think that you actually need to have a table of contents, but this would let a person click through it without using the like chapter switching functionality of the whatever e-reader they're using. Chapters are still useful even if you don't have the table of contents. Now here's the thing. We are putting the start point though. When somebody opens the book, if they haven't opened it before, it's going to look for the start point. The start point we're putting here. So it will be after the table of contents on chapter 1. This is the professional way to do it. You don't want to open it up and have it starting with the title page and all that. People expect to be taken to chapter 1. Then if they want to see the other stuff, they page back to it. Okay, so then on each of these, you're going to have your chapter title and your chapter content, which is what I'll be pasting in. 24 times, a lot of fun. And then the ID ties it to the table of contents and your table of contents file, which is over here. So we'll take a look at that now. So you can see these create nav points and a nav navigation. This is what your e-reader uses to create the navigation system. So it lets you go between chapters without necessarily using the actual table of contents and clicking on those links. Then we also have metadata. Now this is, I told you that we're going through Guido Henkel's guide. His guide doesn't tell you how to do this part. I learned how to do this part from a web page that is no longer up. But I've marked every place in it where you need to put your own information. This is XML. This is not HTML. This is XML. So this is for holding metadata about the book that lets it be like sorted by date or sorted alphabetically, that lets its description show up in the reader or in, say, your ebook organizer, and along with the cover image. This right here makes the difference between a professional and an unprofessional ebook. And I'm going to show you how to fill this in. But first, let's get back to this sweet HTML. So we need to change each chapter ID and each chapter heading. You see it's H3, so that'll show it as slightly larger than regular text and broken off. This part doesn't actually, this paragraph I'm going to replace, so that doesn't matter. So let's keep going. If your chapters have titles, then right here in this H3, that's where you'll put it. This ID will not, the reader will not see this. It's used as a link. You can see A is an anchor, I believe is what A stands for, and that's a link. That's something that a link will come find, rather. The H3, though, that's a header. So if you have chapter titles, this is the place to put it. So you might see that I have the start chapter, start ID, and then I go straight to chapter 2 ID. Because the start ID is chapter 1, now it does not care. The system does not look does not apply any meaning at all to these. It just goes, this is just used to mark it for something else to read that will have the same mark. So to make it not off by, like, so you don't have to put chapter 1 here. I put chapter 2 because it's ahead of chapter 2, which will keep you sane. Just notice that I left my chapter titles in from the book that I created this template from. So I'm going to take those out. Okay, yeah, so I need to do that again here. So what we're doing here is creating the table of contents. This will show up as just a list of links to each of the chapters. Hey, pretty good. I did not count. Okay, so now we've got all of our sections ready to paste everything into. So we're just going to copy and paste the chapters in. I don't know that I need to, but I'm going to try to do this, at least a little bit of it, in this narrow, annoyingly narrow view, to try to. So you see, that's what I was saying about why I didn't really need to be adding the white space to around the chapter, because it's already here. This gives you a nice chunk of the page. Now you can have more than 3 blank lines. This will be more than 3 blank lines. This will be 3 blank paragraphs, and paragraphs usually take up a bit more space. The space, there's usually a bit more space between them. I like how this looks on the things that I've read it on, but you could add more at the top. I don't think that you should probably have much more between the actual chapter 1 heading and the content one. That's up to you. Okay, so I am just putting it right here. I am clicking the number beside it so that it highlights just this section, and I'm pasting into it. The view is done by clicking on view. This is the view, and then you can word wrap. I am not writing this, I'm just working on it, and so word wrapping isn't necessary. Just keep looking back and forth. Make sure that you're pasting the right chapter into the right spot. Check your chapter number, and also check that you're pasting it into the content and not into the header. And okay, I didn't explain this to you, but it is pretty self-explanatory. This is a page break. So at the end of every chapter, you've got a page break. Okay, and then I also have a section. It's got a page break. It doesn't have a chapter because my opinion is nobody needs to know to click on it. It's kind of included in the about the author, but if they turn the page, they'll get more of a list of your other books, more books from J. Allen Riker. And then if you're got a Kindle book, I don't think they like links going out to other places. I can't remember honestly. But if somebody's reading it on a Kindle, they probably want to keep reading it on a Kindle. So you can put links to your other books on Amazon here. And you can go, the good thing about doing this yourself is whenever you want to change this, whenever you get a new book that comes out, you can go back into all of your old books and you can put in the URL right there and have always have links to all of your other books so people can finish it, be like, yeah, that's fantastic, I want to read more. And they can just click right through and get more. So yeah, that wasn't too painful, I don't think. But we are not done yet. Okay, so why don't we take a little look. By the way, don't name this content template. Name it your book name. But so I'm going to close this so that I can rename everything, except for the TOC NCX. That is your table of contents, and that is always the name. We'll leave that name. Okay, so I'm going to change these to what they actually should be. Keep the naming consistent between them. The file naming, that will be important when you are doing, when you're typing in metadata and the information to put everything together. So when you install Notepad++, you get a right-click item. This is important because if you click on this HTML file, it's just going to open up in whatever you have set to open your default to open your HTML files, which for me is Chrome. It will open this with your default OPF. It will open it with your default ebook reader. So you'll have to right-click to edit these things. But like I said, your table of contents is always TOC NCX. But let's say that we want to check this out real quick. Then opening it up in Chrome would be great. So you can see a couple things that I forgot to, well, that I said I was going to double back and fill in and that I didn't. And this is why you always check your work. So here you go. Now, if the e-reader this is being made for hasn't, the reader likes to set an indent, then they can set that themselves. Otherwise, it does not. The paragraph is set by the space between the paragraph is set by the browser. If the reader has a certain amount of space that they like, they can set that. Or not, depending on what kind of reader they have, but e-reader they have. But you don't want to make that assumption. There's certainly e-readers that can. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that there's not a bunch of weird of these HTML symbol things. They have all been replaced appropriately with the quotation marks, single quotation marks. We're looking good. These are centered. So we just want to scroll through and look at everything. Just look to see if anything jumps out. We're not going to do a full read right now because by the time you're done with this, you're going to be sick of checking it. Okay, so that is looking pretty good, but we know that there are a couple things that we need to change. So let's just go ahead and do that now. One thing that I noticed is that because it's off the bottom of the screen where I can't really see what's going on because it's not wrapped, I did not actually make my website a live link. And then you can just refresh this. What the heck did I just do? There we go. Okay, so we got that, and let's go up to the top, take care of the front matter. The front matter matters. This one, for some reason, I've got it marked. I've always done it in all caps. That's how I've seen it. So that is what I do. So this one is not going to be an issue for you, but for me, I have to put the publication date, the original, the new publication year, and the old one. Put in your, don't, I'm not a lawyer, and I shouldn't probably include legal copy in this. I may not. I compiled my own from a number of examples, but don't just use mine. Okay, I think that's everything. Got it saved and refresh, reopen it. So you'll see that I have a thing that shows this is being published by a small press. This is a small press dedicated solely to publishing my work. It looks nicer when you check the publisher as it being something than saying, I can't remember what it defaults to. It has something that it says that regarding self-publishing. So instead I have a publisher that just publishes my work. You can see that it's got my information in it now. So it looks like we are good. I don't have links to my books. Guess I should do that. One thing that you will notice is that this BR, this is a break. So otherwise, like I said, HTML doesn't really respect white space when it's not inside of a tag. And so it will ignore this change of line. That's why every paragraph is its own, wrapped in its own tag. So it would put all these on the same line unless you do one of two things. Either make each one of these a paragraph, and that spaces them far apart. Something you can do to keep them within the same within the same body is to have a break. So then they don't get the spacing in between. You'll see when we refresh the page. But first I should put my name. Oh my gosh, this is annoying. So you can see here, it's got my books linked up. Great. Speaking of links, let's test the table of contents. If you're making a reference book, one nice thing you can do is you can put back to table of contents link at the end of every chapter. But this is not a reference book, so people shouldn't be reading it in that way, and they're not used to seeing novels with that feature. So I don't think that that's an added value. Rather, it's a distraction. Okay, looking good. So we have that settled. So let's move on to the other files. You could actually take this, you could put it in Calibre, you could convert it to an EPUB, and it would work. It would work. It's not quite up to our standards yet, though. So let's get this table of contents working not just from the links, but also within the e-reader system. The e-reader expects to find this within a EPUB file. So let's give it what it's looking for. So the nav point is the outermost container. This is XML, and the nav point is the outermost nested item. You can see that when you collapse it down. Like you could collapse it down to, and this is only in, if you open it in something like Notepad++ that recognizes this file type. But you can collapse it down just to the outermost casing, which is nav point. So that is what we need to add in order to get more chapters. I guess that might be about right. I kind of wish I'd done that with one that said chapter. She's so Pete's. Okay. Let's grab one that says chapter and reduce our work by a significant amount. This is one that's, this is one of the, I know is one of the trickier aspects of making an ebook. But it's very easy to test. If you did something wrong, you won't be able to flip through the chapters correctly. So oh man, and I should have fixed this first. Okay, I can do a search and replace on that. So remember, I told you it's good to have a very strict naming system. And the reason is because there will be these references, and if you type something different, it's going to cause you a lot of problems. So that AAAA book title, we're going to change to Hoard. And I know that basically every file that I have, so you see hoard.html, and then this is that anchor ID, start chapter 2, and you can see right here hoard.html. So we know that it's right. Okay, so now we need to go through change all of these. Chapter 5, chapter 5, chapter 6. So what I'm going to do, so that I don't mess all this up, is I'm just going to do these first, and then I'm going to come back. Need to get rid of the extras that I accidentally put in there, and do the about the author. Sure, that's right. Yep, chapter 25, about the author. Okay, so now I have to change the play order. Okay, there we go. We'll see if that works when we actually make the file, but I think it's pretty good. All right, so now we're going to deal with the OPF file. This is what holds the metadata. Um, Book title. In case you didn't hear me talk about it earlier, I never liked the ending that I was asked to put on this book, and so I am releasing it with my original ending now. And I think that, judging from some of the negatives reviews, I think that other people saw it the same way I did, and that they will appreciate this. And even if they don't, I still like having my version out there. Okay, so this is going to take research, some research on your part. I've got everything labeled where you need to go, but there are some things that you're going to have to look into for yourself. So publisher, for me, I know that. Sucker Punch Press, a very legitimate publisher that happens to just only publish my books. I know now this is now called a BISAC code, but the problem is that it still has to stay in the code as basic code, because you can't just change something that's been going for years. But you can look this up and it will tell you the number that is associated with your genre. So that's what subject is. My subject is horror, and that is the number associated with horror. Whatever your primary genre is, you will put that here, and you will look up the BISAC code. If you look up basic code, if you search for basic code genre, it will also give it to you. You're going to need your book's description. And this is one place where it's got a bit of HTML in it because you can break it up, which looks nice. You're going to need your description at several points during this process, so have it typed already. I do not like descriptions, so I don't like making them. I shouldn't say I don't like descriptions. That'd be a weird thing to say. You know what's going to do that. Don't know why I even tried. Okay, so we'll put our breaks in here. I do it this way where I put that at the end, but it's probably actually, I don't think it matters. Okay, so here I have the date in the format of this. This always works for me, but you'll see when we convert it in Calibre and I look inside the EPUB file that it will put it in a different format. So, your choice. Jeez, I'm doing very bad at selecting these things. The price that you put in here is not binding, so put whatever you want. This does not really matter. One thing we need to make sure is that we get our naming for this right. So you can see that I'm using the same cover as the last time you saw. I'm wondering about this color. I might change it to a kind of sickening yellow and just pull that up here. I haven't decided yet. But for now, this is what we're going with. So hoardcover.jpg. You can see here hoardcover.jpg. This is the name of a demo. I'm not sure if that's set like when Amazon shows a demo or something. I don't know. It gives you a file name that gets downloaded. Maybe. My face is in the way. Okay, so then we will want to do the HTML file and remember to name it exactly. These should all, which is not that. So like the fact that I have capitalized book cover name, or I mean, I have a capitalized cover name, I don't like. So I'm actually gonna lowercase it and then lowercase it. See the table of contents file. That name of that never needs to change, so that can, you'll always have that right if you never change it. See, it says the start point. All right, I think we're good. So let's go ahead and give making this a try. Sometimes it does not work on the first try. And that is okay. So you can type in here PowerShell and it will bring up PowerShell. And then you see how I have this KindleGen executable here. When I type it in PowerShell in here, instead of opening it separately, it opens it with it set to this location. So that's very convenient. Then you type this to run the KindleGen executable and run it on, not on amongprey.opf, because that's not what we're working on. Hoard.opf. Okay, let's see what it does. No errors. So that means it got everything, it found everything it expected. Now, you see this? That's interesting. It did not like, looks like it did not like the ellipses in the metadata description, which is kind of weird, except for one thing. Probably doesn't recognize that character. That's the same reason why we had to replace it in the HTML. So what I need to do is replace the single ellipsis with 3 periods. Ellipses get really overused. So, question if you're actually using it correctly. Don't know if it's particularly being used correctly here. Maybe. Okay, so it generated a Mobi file. See that right here? We're going to get rid of that because we need to run this again. You just hit up and it will bring up your last command. Okay, and there we go. Now, if you had misnamed something, like if you'd misnamed your cover file, which is something that for some reason I do sometimes, or I forget to put it in the folder, then it'll have a little error in here. The fact that it doesn't have any errors and it says that it was successfully generated. I think it'll say like generated with errors, maybe, if you have something that allows it to generate, but there's some sort of problem with it. So this is good, very good. Okay, so here we have Calibre. Calibre is what I'm going to use to convert the Mobi into an EPUB. Is it the best? I am not convinced at this time that it is necessarily the best, but I will tell you something funny. I was using a online service, and when I looked, I ran it and used it to convert a Mobi to an EPUB. And when I went into the EPUB and looked at the metadata myself, they said that Calibre had made it. So it's like they have Calibre on their servers doing the conversions. This is not something that you necessarily need to worry about as long as you don't end up ever seeing problems in it, but it is something that I hope to speak on in the future. I just need to do some investigation. So we drop our Mobi file in here, and then we convert it. So you can see convert books. You want the output to be, move this down a little. Input is Mobi, that's correct. You want the output to be EPUB. So you can see it's tagged as horror, but that's not going to come through exactly how you want it. So we'll tweak the metadata that this outputs to make sure that it's as correct as possible. I need to put the Riker cut on the cover. Do I? Oh, I don't like this. We'll see if I go through and just change the whole thing to the Horde, but then it's going to confuse people. Yeah, I guess I need to. Okay. Anyway, I'll do that later. Okay, so let's run it. It'll show up as a job right here while it's running, and then you'll see the formats. So then you can open up the folder, and there you go. So this is the folder that's within the Calibre library, and we can grab this one, this EPUB, and we can move it into our file. You put it here. You can rename it something more simple. Put it here. I don't know what your structure is. You decide where to put it. It doesn't need to go in the Mobi file. The Mobi folder, the purpose of the Mobi folder is for making that Mobi file. All right, so let's check it out. Now, one interesting thing is I don't believe that you can use PNGs with transparencies, and so if this were to have like a nighttime reading background, like this would show a big white square around it. But on anything white, then this looks good. Just something to take note of. I don't think there's anything I can do about that. I don't think it respects PNG transparencies. So you can go through and you can read this. You see the way that the spacing works here. There's some space above the chapter, some space below it. Okay, now you're definitely going to want to do a very thorough check of this. I'm not going to do that right now. I know that you may be surprised. What boring thing won't Jeff show us? I'm not going to show myself reading this, but you're going to want to read it closely. At this point, I'm usually very sick of checking this, but I will still read it. It's not until I create the paper version where I have someone else read it for me. By that point, I'm absolutely at my end, and also I'm figuring that I'm so accustomed to reading it over and over again that I'll miss things. I like to give these a listen too. So the reason that you want to check it thoroughly is to make sure, the biggest thing is to just make sure you didn't get any copy and paste errors. And also when you get it into your reader, check the chapter jumping capability on whatever reader you're on, and make sure that everything's going to the right spot. Okay, so This is looking good. It does need to be checked. One last thing that I want to show you what it is that. So I want to delete this one because you only want one copy right now. The reason for that is because we are going to edit this. You don't have to edit it if you feel like that is good enough. An EPUB is really just a zip. Now, this does not work on Mobi. A Mobi is like a compiled file. If you do this, you will end up with something that has nonsense. But if you go into this, extract it so that we can actually edit it. So I just extracted it right here. So we go into this, and we can see our files. Now, why don't I want to make an EPUB file by hand? I don't want to make an EPUB file by hand because each chapter is broken out into its own separate HTML file. There's just so much linking going on here that for me, I feel like it's just a great chance to make a mistake. If there was just something that would convert it as faithfully as possible, that would be a much better option. And so that is what I am trying to find. So let's take a look at the OPF file because with Notepad++, because this is what I have a problem with. So you can see it's got then links to all of the different HTML files. But one thing that it does, it puts the contributor OPF role to Calibre. I make my own OPF. I'm not going to credit Calibre with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at an OPF file that I did make by hand and make sure that it has everything. There's one big thing that it does not have that I think that it needs to have. Well, there are a couple things. So it's got Sucker Punch Press. It's got, you'll see that the date is formatted differently. I'm just going to leave it like this. It clearly understands how to read this, so I'm going to leave that. One thing that does need to change though is you'll notice that the subject does not include the BISAC code, also known as the basic code. So I am going to put that in here. Whether you want to mess with this to that degree is up to you. You see that I have a role of author in here. It's got my name in the role of author, so that's a little bit different. You can see the creator is this line. Language is EN instead of EN-US. Doesn't probably matter too much. Okay, so the main thing that I want to do with this is to add that BISAC code. I don't know that there's any place that uses it, but I'm doing it because I am accustomed to it. The other thing that I want to show you though is the way that it does the formatting. It's not here, it is. So right here, you've got your page styles and your style sheet. So the formatting, this is what happens when you break the formatting out from the HTML as you create a CSS file. So here we've got the page style. So it's just got the margin at the top and the bottom. I mean, once again, I think that the reader can handle, the e-reader, like program or device can handle that. And my hope is that I think a lot of this gets overwritten by the user preference, but I've definitely seen some extremely wonky ebooks that hold on to a bunch of the formatting data that shouldn't have been included for presentation in, say, Word or something like that. So you'll see here where while we didn't set the font size, this does say the font size for several of the different things. I don't like that. I found that the other conversion I did, even though it said it was Calibre, it did not include a lot of these font sizes. And so that leaves it up to the reader and their default settings. But this is not terrible. There's not a ton of stuff going on, and so I've so far been happy with all the EPUBs that I've seen, so I'm leaving it. If you find a better way to convert these, let me know. I found one that I would say is slightly better, but not good enough to have you uploading your books online in order to do it. I know that I'm being a little paranoid there, but it's just, if I don't have to, I prefer not to. I for you guys to check it out. I uploaded a couple of my books. They've all been pirated. Like, they used to be, I used to have a vanity alert, like Google search, for my name. And after a while, the only things I ever got were the notifications of my novels being added to torrent sites. So uh, it's already out there. After you change that, sorry, one thing that you're going to need to do is zip this back up. So that last step might be overkill as far as turning it into a zip file. That's more to show you what's going on behind the scenes. And if you pay somebody to format your book for them, for you, that lets you go in and check and make sure that it's not junk. Okay, now see, should have done a search for that, so I'm going to need to do a search for this before I upload it. It's a E with an accent, a goo. Okay, but you can see I zipped it back up and it works. Okay, so I hope this didn't scare you too badly. My intention was to show you that if you use my templates and just follow step by step along the templates and with this video, then this is not that complex of a process. If this is holding you up, then find something, maybe Scrivener, that will make a EPUB for you where you can enter the metadata. The metadata is, I think, important. So that is it from me. I'm very tired of talking. And next time I will show you how to go into Amazon and actually publish your book. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for sticking through this. Maybe you're following along and working along. Either way, have a great rest of your day.